Good afternoon, my name is Elizabeth Joyce and this is my EPQ presentation. So what is an EPQ? An EPQ is a level 3 qualification. It's worth half an A-level and it's usually used to reduce offers for uni because it shows all different skills that you've learned and it just helps universities get an idea of who you are. So it involves planning, research, an essay or an artefact. So I chose an essay, but a lot of people did choose to do artefacts. A lot of evaluation and a presentation. So my title was, to what extent was the suffrage movement solely responsible for women gaining the vote in the UK over the age of 21 in 1928? In my EPQ, or in the essay itself, I broke it down into different sections and points I wanted to get across. These points were the suffragettes and suffragists that make up the suffrage movement, men's support, men and women's opposition, and women's contribution during the war. So what inspired me to choose the suffrage movement? A lot of my inspiration came from history, things I know in the past. I really love history. I didn't take it as an A-level, but choosing this as a subject made me realise that I could choose it. So I did a GCSE English speaking presentation on just the suffragettes, but I wanted to go into more detail about it, so I did just looking at all of them. Generation gaps, I did a series of interviews within my EPQ to find out what people knew, but I didn't just choose from random. I chose a couple of people, 2 or 3 people from each generation, so people that are younger than me, people that are my age, people that are my mum's age, and then the oldest generation. And like I said, just general interest. I love history and I wanted to do a topic based on history. Other options I considered, I looked at controversies including the royal family, so the differences and similarities between Diana and Meghan, whether or not Diana's car crash was planned or not. Fox hunting, I ride horses, so I wanted to look at what people thought about that sort of thing because some people are against it, some people are for it, but it's always a tricky conversation when it comes up. Another tricky conversation is feminism, so I've got Emma Watson there. Because I do consider myself a feminist, not in the extreme way that is synonymous with man-hating, but I do consider men and women should have equal rights, and that's what Emma Watson believes as well. I looked at Lord of the Rings, mainly inspired by Miss Auburn, because it was one of the first things she introduced us to, was, as an example topic, was Lord of the Rings. It was a bit too broad for me, so I wanted to look at the individual aspects, so how he made the maps, Tolkien, discovered the languages and all the intricate details of Lord of the Rings you don't necessarily think about when you're reading the books or watching the films. I wanted to also look at the topic of war, more specifically the impact of PTSD on soldiers or the effect on people going to war on the families. So I come from a military background, so I decided that probably wouldn't be the best option to choose because it's a bit too personal. I looked at literature. I wanted to look more specifically at the women of literature, so female protagonists and the lack of female protagonists. But I was dissuaded from this because I'm probably going to do that for my English coursework, so I didn't really want to repeat myself. And then the last topic I looked at was film. I love films, but it's not really something, you can't really base an EPQ on your favourite film. You might also get bored of it at the end, and I don't really know how many times I could watch Mamma Mia and get completely fed up with it. So I decided against them and settled for my topic, which was the suffrage movement. So planning your EPQ, a lot of planning goes into it. I did a diary, which is basically where you record everything you've been doing, your initial topic ideas, which is what I showed before, a proposal, just stating, so we did it to Mr. Auburn, stating what you want to do, how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it by. The when you're going to do it by also links into the timelines. You need to have a specific timing of when you're going to do everything. So you need to finish your research by this date, complete your presentation by this date. That was probably the hardest bit for me because I'm not that great at time management. I mean, I got better throughout this whole process, but I wasn't very good to start off with. Mentor meetings, my mentor was Mr. Trimby. He obviously teaching history. He was really useful for me to look at the different opinions that history has given in the past of the suffrage movement and who had the most important role in it. And then planning the essay, I didn't think I needed to do it until I accidentally sat down to try and write the essay. Got completely stuck, I just gave up, went to Miss Norman saying I can't do this, and she was like, well, let's see your plan, how much did you do? And obviously I hadn't done anything. So as I said before, EPQ diary, it looks worse than it is. It's basically, you have to write obviously the date, what you did, and evaluation of what you did. There is a lot of evaluation in EPQ. That's my biggest input that I can say. You just need to evaluate everything. So starting off, literally mentioning everything. You don't have to start it when you've got your initial idea. You can start it when you've, so I don't even mention the suffrage movement until about halfway down the first page. You just write about everything that you've done. The timeline, as you can see, I only did 2 timelines because one was way more accurate than the other. My first one, a lot of gaps. I didn't complete anything on time. And then, so you can see the incomplete is the pink section. I did leave quite a lot of time to complete stuff, but I ended up getting it done, which was great. As I said, planning the essay, I broke it up into sections of what I wanted to talk about, which is what I talked about earlier, the suffragists, suffragettes, men's opposition, men's support, and impact of the war. Dividing the word count. Word count is quite important in this, because you don't feel like when you're looking at it, you feel like it's a lot more words than it actually is. But dividing the word count makes it easier just to talk about each thing. So you want to put 400 in your introduction and then paragraphs of 800, and you'll get the original word count. Linking back to the question, always do that in any essay you do. Personal opinions, which differs from the essays I'm used to writing, because obviously I'm explaining what I learned throughout this whole topic, not just what historians say or stuff like that. And drafting, I only ended up doing 1 draft. I know a lot of people did a lot other drafts. So I basically just, once I did my draft, went through it, I marked it. I wanted to make it as best as I could. So I only ended up doing 2 drafts, which is again fine if you just want to do 2. Researching is the next section. So you've got planning and research. Research was my favourite section. I found it really easy, really enjoyable. It took up quite a lot of time, so I often prioritised it over everything else, which I probably shouldn't have, because I didn't need that much research. It really helped me when writing the essay, but it was unnecessary. So I looked at specific key figures. So for example, Millicent Fawcett, Lydia Becker, Emmeline Pankhurst, Emily Davison, big key players in the suffrage movement. Previous work, it was just a small section of research I had from my GCSEs. So it wasn't huge, but it gave me a topic and a subject to just expand on. Different sections for points in the argument. That's the same thing I was talking about, just splitting it up. Men's opposition, men's support. Referencing, so that's my reference table that I started looking at. Referencing is important because when you write the final essay, you need to footnote your work and where you got all those different sources from. I then completed interviews, as I said earlier, with different people. I'll speak more about that later. And then I created my own timeline, which was different to the EPQ timeline. It was a timeline of the suffrage movement. So this is, speaking of which, my timeline. So I looked at just the year, the month, and the event. I looked at the most important stuff and I put pictures to help. This isn't all of it, but it was as much as I could fit on a slide. So the Mud March was quite important, and just looking at what key points had an impact on women gaining the vote. My resources, obviously you have to reference everywhere you've got resources, so this isn't all of it, but I read a couple books. BBC was really helpful. The National Archives actually was extremely helpful because as you can see down here, it gave me lots of videos, it's a lot more interesting to see videos of a time period that you're looking at rather than just reading something. My interviews, as I'm talking about it, feel free to read the questions. If you want to answer one, feel free, or just answer it in your head. It's good to get you thinking about these sort of things. So I looked at the different questions of what do you understand about the terms, because a lot of people don't actually know about the difference between the suffragists and suffragettes. A lot of people call it the suffragette movement, when in fact it's the suffrage movement, because there were suffragettes who were activists and suffragists who were peaceful protesters. I did a mixture of opinions, or opinional questions, so it would be would you have taken part, which organisation, and then some factual questions which should just be, as I said, like how long did it take for women to get the vote, so it was 100 years. I looked at Emily Davison. I asked a lot of questions about Emily Davison because she's more of a well-known figure, but not for her name, for her actions. She was the woman that jumped in front of the horse at the Epsom Derby. And then my final essay, just breaking it down into sections is the best way to do it. The word count helps a lot. I had a lot of stuff I wanted to say, so I needed to minimise it as best I could. What I learned, my strengths from the whole EPQ project was organisational skills, research and essay progression. So my organisation actually improved a massive amount from this, purely because I had a structure to follow and I knew what I was doing. My research, I mean, I've always loved research, it was just really interesting to do. And then my essay progression was just the improvement in my essays. I haven't been the strongest at writing essays, but then I came to the EPQ, and because I could choose my own topic that I was passionate about, that I wanted to do, my essays improved. Weaknesses, as I said earlier, time management, it's just really difficult to know exactly when you're going to finish something. Prioritising, I often prioritise research because I found it more fun than, for example, evaluating all the resources, that sort of stuff. And procrastinating, I just did not focus a lot of the time. Any questions?